This session, as I said earlier, has two segments to it. The first segment is entitled Cybersecurity in a Smart World, and it will be delivered by Dr. Cornelius Namiluko, who, as I said just prior to the break, came from Zambia and went to Wolfson beginning in 2007. At Oxford, he read for an MSc, followed by a DPhil in computer science, and he's prior to that, been involved in the creation of life-saving software systems in Africa. It's as a result of his studies here at Oxford that he's become involved with KPMG as an expert on cybersecurity. And Cornelius, we welcome you back. We're thrilled to have you with us, and we very much look forward to your talk. At the conclusion of Cornelius's talk, we will again take Q&A and engagement from all of you. Thank you. Cornelius, welcome.
Thank you so much for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be back at Rod's house. I've been in Oxford actually for the last 7 years, so it's not a strange place for me. I'm always here once in a while. So I want to talk a little bit about cybersecurity. I'm actually working with KPMG, and one of the things I actually focus on is helping clients, and this is like big organizations, banks and the like, to try and secure their systems. But the thing that's very close to my heart is really small devices and how you use those devices to actually improve lives as well as to sort of entertain yourselves. This is why I want to talk about a smart world and how cybersecurity works in a smart world. So this morning I actually woke up and looked around my house and just trying to see what devices I had in my house. Just a quick look, I was actually able to count at least a dozen devices in my house, and it's a very basic house. It's not really, techy or anything. So you can think about having a cell phone. You can think about having a laptops. These are common devices that almost everyone has in the house. Smartphones have become so ubiquitous that you don't even think that it's a smartphone every time that you're actually using it. You have tablets. You have, most recently, smartwatches. I think most of you must have heard the new announcement from Apple where they are launching a smartwatch. So what's this trend? I mean, most of these devices have been around for some time. If you think about the laptop or you think about computers, they've been around for a long time. But currently there's miniaturization, which means that you can now pack more computing power into very small devices. So if you think about the smartwatch, this smartwatch is able to perform computations much faster than most of the computers from 10 years ago. It's got memory, it's got internet capability, so it can connect to the internet and do lots of things. The interesting thing about, for example, a smartwatch is that, based on at least the Apple ones, it actually allows you to monitor your health. So as you are walking around, it can count the number of steps that you are taking. It can advise you whether you are, being lazy or whether you are actually doing what you're supposed to be doing. So, in other words, all these devices, they're becoming more and more common. You can find devices all over the place. One of the other places that these devices are being used in is in health. So you can have pacemakers which are actually put in your body. I think pacemakers have been around for a long time. But the interesting thing right now is that you can actually have pacemakers which you can connect to the internet, right? So if you think about what possibilities that opens up, obviously for the practitioners, for the health practitioners, it allows them to actually monitor or try and see how the patient's heart is doing. But also that means that it's out there, it's on the internet. Anyone can, with some kind of effort, they can actually be able to connect to those devices. Another example is a device which you just put on your skin, which helps you to fight against epilepsy. So all these devices, even though they've been around for a long time, the fact that we can now connect them to the internet, the fact that we can make them, they're becoming more and more smarter. You can put lots of algorithms which allow them to operate autonomously. You don't need to automatically, press a button or anything for them to react. So they are becoming more and more intelligent and and therefore helping us save lives. Another example I'd like to share about, which is something very close to my heart, is this project called SmartCare. So this is a project that we started in Zambia with the CDC, support from the CDC and EGPAF. So the idea was that can we actually use very cheap and very smart technologies to fight against HIV/AIDS and lots of other diseases that affect Africa. So we developed this system which went through lots of iterations, but eventually it was called SmartCare. And the idea is that you don't need paper records to store patient records. You just have a smart card, and therefore allowing patients to move from one site to the other. Well, I'm fine. That's nice. I mean, it's one of the things I actually personally worked on is this idea of being able to detect treatment failure. So if you've got patients that are enrolled in your program, how do you know that this certain medication is failing? So with algorithms, making the system smart, we can actually detect that this patient is failing treatment and therefore give them special attention. So it's all these technologies are very nice. We can actually save lots of lives. I earlier mentioned that in my house I had about a dozen devices. And I think this is not uncommon. I think most of the homes actually have lots of devices. But you might say, well, in my case, I'm not techie, therefore I'm not going to, I don't count myself to be among this group which is sort of involved with making things smart. But actually, certain things, or for certain devices, you don't have much of a choice. So right now in the UK, there's this move of smart meters. I'm sure most people must have heard about it. So right now, I think in about 4 years' time or so, all the homes in the UK, we're talking about 50 million households or something like that, all of them will have smart meters, which means that all your homes will actually be connected to the internet, in a way. So if we consider the smart home again, so I mentioned that in my house I've got a few devices, but if you look at this model here, this is sort of what we are going towards. You can think about having your TVs, having your computers, having your fridges. I think most of you must have heard the news last year that a fridge was hacked on the internet, which is very very interesting. Makes everything go sour or something. So we've got temperature sensors, we've got video cameras, we've got everything. You can put everything in your home and make it what is being called a smart home. Well and fine. I think that's really interesting. It makes our lives very, very interesting. I was actually involved in a project a couple of years ago where we're making a system which allows you to interconnect your devices. So if you have your car and you've got your TV, why not transfer the video that you're watching on the TV? When you go into your car, you want to automatically start watching from where you stopped, which is like really interesting things. So there's a lot that we can do once we start interconnecting these devices. It makes our lives a lot better. It makes us happier in short. Because if you imagine right now, if I don't have my cell phone, I become very, very sad actually. And I think it should be true for most people. So that's the smart home. Then outside the home now, we are moving into the cities. We can actually take this technology into the cities. So right now, there's this concept of autonomous vehicles, or vehicles that can actually drive themselves, right? So I think earlier, maybe last year or 2 years ago, most people must have seen news that Google is testing these driverless cars, as they are called. And I think a couple of months ago, the UK government announced that they will be allowing cars, certain lanes, to actually test the driverless car. So in other words, we don't have much of a choice. These cars are actually coming. They're going to be on our roads. So it's, in a way, again, it's making our lives a lot better. If you think about those people who drink a lot, you just need to get into the car and the car will drive you home. You don't have to cause other, inconveniences to other people. So it's making our lives a lot better. Going back to the point I mentioned about smart meters. So smart meters are going to be connected to what's called a smart grid. And the whole idea of the smart grid is to actually be able to interconnect all the renewable energies, the energies that we are generating from the home. Can we push it back onto the national grid so that it can be distributed somewhere else? But then, as part of that, we also want to put communication lines on the grid, such that will be able to detect when there's going to be a lot of demand, and therefore manage our power generation and transmission. So in all, there's a lot of interesting activities going on in the smart grid as well. And I'm sure, as we are building these smart cities, we also need to develop. We also need to care for our users and make sure that we create a lane for them. So what about cybersecurity? I mean, where does cybersecurity come in with all this? I've talked about so many of these technologies. I think if you look at this, they are making a lot of our lives a lot better. But then at the same time, if you critically think about it, what we are doing right now is that for something to be called smart, we need to push it onto the internet. We need to be able to connect to the internet, download books, be able to push information to the internet, as well as download information to it. So once you start connecting things onto a network which is globally accessible, then you run the risk that, in as much as you want to access your TV or your camera from when you're away from home, it's also possible that someone else might be able to do that on your behalf, right? So there's this danger that as we are pushing things onto the internet, it's possible that someone else might actually be able to access your devices. So where does cybersecurity mainly fit in? So if you think about the things that are actually driving this smart technologies or smart world, most of the things are actually being driven by this idea that you can easily construct these devices. You can easily construct a smart home by buying very cheap computers, because right now computers are very cheap, and right now you can buy a very small device. Most of you might have heard of a Raspberry Pi, a very small chip which is like that. It has all the computing power. So you can get that and then wrap it in some kind of a casing and whatever, and maybe connect it to your shower system or connect it to your floor or whatever, and make your smart home. So it's very easy to actually create any of these devices. So today, if I came up with an idea of some technology which moves the wall, depending on, so that I don't have doors, as an example, I can create a device like this, load all the software that I need, and be able to do that. Of course, you need a lot more other things in terms of maybe mechanical components and things like that. But my point here is that it's very easy, it's very cheap actually to create most of these smart devices. The other point also is in terms of connectivity. So again, for anything to be called smart, you somehow need it to be connected to the internet. So right now, if your phone is you run out of credit for internet credits, you find that you can't actually use the phone. It just becomes useless. There's nothing else you can do with it. So you need that internet connection. For the smart meters to work, you need to connect them to some kind of network which allows information to flow from your house to the suppliers. The problem with that is that once you connect it to the internet, then there's nothing that prevents it from anyone else actually being able to access. Of course, when you're developing these things, we, as security experts or security engineers, we try and develop security into the products. But the fact that you are moving it out of your home, which was originally closed up, then you are putting it on the internet, then you're actually introducing another vector into which the devices can be accessed. The other point I want to talk about is just in terms of innovation. So one of the things that happens, I'm actually guilty of this myself. Every time we have ideas, so if we have come up with a brilliant idea, especially in technology, we are very quick. We want to take it to the market first. I want to be the first one to the market before anyone else copies the idea or creates something better. So as a result of that, security becomes an afterthought. You don't care about security. You want to say, well, this is a product I'm coming up with. Let me take it to the market and see how the market reacts. And then you only think about security when things start going wrong. The other thing, again, security, in as much as you would want to think about it from the start, the problem is that when you start thinking about that, you run the risk that it can actually get in the way of your innovation. So in my personal time when I'm working on some ideas, because I'm involved in both security and on the innovation side, I always get stuck at some point. So everything I'm trying to build, I'm asking myself, how can this be broken? So as a result of that, it slows me down in terms of pushing some of the ideas forward. The other problem with technology in a way is that I think traditionally we've come up with this model where we say, well, we're going to fix something when an issue has been reported or when something has been detected. So for example, I think people probably don't know this, but every Tuesday, Microsoft has got what they call the Patch Tuesday. So every Tuesday, they release software systems that actually try to patch up any holes that may be there in the system. This happens now almost automatically. We don't even need to think about it. So as a whole, as an industry as a whole, we've got this tradition of trying to always catch up with the attackers. They're always a step ahead. So if they find a way of breaking our system, then we fix that. Again, they find something else, then we fix. We're always trying to catch up with them. The other problem with security, again, is that in as much as, we want to be secure, but people actually don't appreciate security. No one really knows. What happens if your password is known by someone else, by an attacker? We only get to know about that when it's been reported in the news or when something actually goes wrong. As a result of that, as security experts, most of the time we find that we are pushed aside. So, you know what? Security will come later. Let's try and push this to the market. Again, we can go on and on talking about security problems. I think what I've talked about here is I haven't even gone into any technical details or given specific examples of cyber attacks. But there's a lot in the news. Almost every time every week, there's something that's reported about security. I think 2 weeks ago, we must have heard about the Apple cloud being hacked by attackers. So all those things are always in the news. But all hope is not lost. There's a lot that's already going on. As security experts, we sit around tables and try and think about how do we actually defeat the enemy? How do we stay a step ahead of the enemies? The governments have also been doing a lot. So I think the UK government, last year or 2 years ago, they set up just across the road, there's a cyber security doctor training center, so where they're trying to train the next generation of security experts. The US government, I think last year or 2 years ago, Obama issued the statement saying that cybersecurity was one of the issues on the agenda. So there's a lot that the governments are doing to try and protect us in a way. But at the same time, sometimes they hack us, But as engineers, we also need to think about security seriously. We need to build security into our products so that we protect our consumers. The flip side to that is that as engineers, if consumers don't demand for security, we're actually not going to build it because it takes time. We want to be the first to the market, therefore we push security aside. So as consumers, as people using these devices, we need to be aware about what could go wrong and try and push these people to build security into their products. Going back to the point that was made about history and connecting that to the generations, I think it's also important that cybersecurity, I think, has to be similar to history, but it also has to be part of the curriculum so that we try and help the next generation understand what they're getting themselves into. And lastly, security problems will always be there, but we should still feel free to innovate. We need to still keep, bringing out these great ideas, these smart devices, and making ourselves a better place. Thank you so much for your attention.
How we would want to be wise and secure in using it. I guess two things came to mind. Do you use iCloud, and what do we do on a personal basis to make sure that we're cyber secure, especially where kids are concerned with iPads and so on?
Yeah, That's a very good point, actually, and you know, having kids myself, it's something that concerns me. I always think, well, how is it going to be in the next few years? You know, if I look at where right now I've got like, you know, a 2.5-year-old, the way he uses a computer, he uses it much better than I used it, you know, than I could possibly do in the last, you know, 10 years or something. And every time I try to hide stuff from him, he's still going to find different ways, and he essentially hacks into my systems. So I think it's a worry, especially for the next generation. Again, if you try and think about the perception of security, the perception of privacy, and how we see that, the next generation don't really care about that, and it's something that we need to bring forward. Going back to the question of whether you should use iCloud or anything, I think most of the time when we are talking about security, we break it down to risk. So and try and compute what's called the risk appetite. So how much, you know, what kind of information do you send there, and what do you think would happen to your life if it was exposed? So I think it just comes, even on a personal level, I would encourage someone to try and establish, you know, if I post this type of video versus this other type of video on this cloud, what are the possible consequences if at all it was leaked or anything? So yeah, I think it's something that we need to.
Can I, just a question not related to the security issue, thank you for the plug again, question. I think the person, in the sense to say historian's question, I remember when I was young, those of us in the room were old enough to remember this, you know, if we'd said what will be happening in 2014, we'd all have been travelling around in jetpacks, you know, with rocket things on our backs like James Bond. I mean, I remember that, and none of us would have been working at all, we'd been in the leisure society, we would have been travelling. So the prediction was just so way out, because that's not the way society changes. I just was fascinated. You just, as a throwaway line, said, the driverless car, well, Google's invented it, so it'll be here. And equally, there was, I think, quite a lot of debate about the watch this week, about will people really use this? I just wondered, this is just a purely personal point of view. What do you think are the elements of the smart new world that will really be seen to have utility and last? And are there sort of examples of things that people thought would be the next big thing, you know, in your lifetime, which proved to be complete losers?
That's an interesting point, and it's a very tough question to answer, actually. I think technology is like that. I think if you think about the way technology works, there's always more like a test. So someone will try and push something out, try and see what the market does, try and see whether people respond to it. The smartwatches that, you know, Apple announced, you know, a week ago or something, it's not like they're the first ones. You know, smartwatches have been on Android platforms. They've been around, I think, for over a year now. But I think it's all about convenience. It's all about trying to see whether the technology works for you. You know, so if you think about the watch right now, I think one of the things that personally I found quite fascinating about the Apple Watch is just the idea that you can actually swap the straps. You know, I thought about, well, a watch. I mean, if you're putting on a grey suit, you don't want to have a red strip, so you can actually swap that. That makes that product usable. That makes it convenient for people. So I think technologies like that. I think there's going to be things that will be tried, and then some of the stuff will be pushed back. But I think the whole idea, the whole concept of, you know, smart devices, things that are actually really small, are real. I think they are happening right now, and in as much as we can try and fight some of the things, I think certain things will definitely push through. You know, you can choose whether to put in a watch or not, but you can't choose whether to have a smart meter or not. So certain things will definitely be forced on us.
Excuse me, like many other tourists without UK telephones, I spend my time in London seeking out free Wi-Fi. And you know, there are crowds of people wherever there's free Wi-Fi. How do you evaluate the vulnerabilities that it exposes us to if we rely on free Wi-Fi with an iPhone just to get our email?
Wow. It's very interesting. So I've got one of my colleagues who essentially just spends his time trying to move around, trying to essentially try and see if he can crack into Wi-Fi. it's a very interesting area. Wireless network is a very interesting area. The fact that it's free doesn't actually, in terms of security, I think it's not really the deciding factor. You could have something that you pay for which is still not secure. So it's not that easy to say, well, it's free, therefore it's not secure. In terms of I think my advice would be to try and just make sure that every time you're using any device connecting to any kind of network, any kind of wireless network, you need to have some kind of secure device, a secure way of actually connecting to the other system. So for example, if you're going to be doing online banking and you find a free open wireless network, you probably want to think about it a little bit more. Whereas if you are, what I'm trying to think about things that you might not want to care about. I was going to say, if you are searching for something on Google, maybe you may not want it to be so secure, but actually, the fact that if you search for malaria or anything, that's something very sensitive to you. So again, you want to be secure. So in other words, I think we need to be able to do these things in a secure way, and I think it's up to the manufacturers of these devices and the people who make the software to make it very easy for users to secure their communication.
Okay. Well, look, Cornelius, thank you so much for the most interesting talk, and thank you all for your questions as well.
Thank you so much.